again. Oh, Toistele.
Okay. Holiness, good to see you again. So much.
I can sit down. Yes.
Your Holiness, it's an enormous privilege for us to welcome you here this afternoon for the inaugural event of the Dalai Lama Center for Compassion. His Holiness has very kindly said that he would speak for a few minutes about secular ethics and the role of compassion in ethics. We are an ethics research center, and His Holiness will speak for a few minutes on that. After that, His Holiness has kindly said that he would answer some questions about his life. I've asked him to draw some lessons from life, from his experiences in this, his 80th year.
Me, as a one Tibetan who born in a very remote, small village, and my mother, illiterate, right? But very, very kind mother, very kind for mother. My father also is illiterate, very much fond horse, and very short temper. Big contrast, right? Mother, very, very kind. Father, short temper, like that. So I'm wondering, is this father and mother? I don't know. So then, I born in 1935. Almost start Sino-Japanese conflict. In Europe, Nazi power, developed. So then soon after Sino-Japanese conflict, I think a lot of people killed, a lot of people suffer. Then Europe, Second World War, a lot of people killed. After war, a lot of difficulties, like that. Then Korean War, Chinese Civil War, Korean War, and then Vienna War. Now, I think human being on this planet, through immense suffering, problem, I think now supposed to see, fully aware how much damage through violence, but still on this planet, even 21st century, you see, still violence. Now, not only the nationalist feeling, or I think a national feeling or ideology feeling, but now you see the religious, different religious faith also causing more killing. Unthinkable. Now, such sort of reality, such surrounding. Till I myself say no harm, then, okay, contented. Is absolutely wrong. I'm part of humanity. So we have to think serious concern about well-being of humanity. Then this problem, due to certain causes, and these things happen. Quite often in America, so I express gun control, a lot of talk, gun control. I express real gun control should take here. Mind, sort of fully committed with belief, non-violence, ahimsa is the only way, human way, you see, solving problem. Once that convince, develop, that's the gun control. Then gun available, never use. Like that. So therefore, now, because of the circumstances and my own now life, almost you see growing war, different part of the world. So then I constantly thinking, what's this method for long run? Peaceful world, for peaceful world. Religion, at least, I think 2,000, 3,000 years, religion there. But frankly speaking, failed to bring peaceful world. And worst, even religious faith itself, more division, more killing. Arab, Syria, Iraq, and Pakistan also. Difficult. And also, some extent, Burma, Buddhist, Islam, and Sri Lanka, Hindus, Buddhism, Buddhist. So then we have to think, all these, our mentality, there's too much concern about differences. So these differences, when we're born, no differences. When we die, no differences. When we got ill, no differences. Isn't it? So then, fundamental level, we are same human being. Mentally, emotionally, physically, we are same. And more important, everyone wants happy life, do not want suffering, do not want war, violence. But war not come from sky. War start just gun. No. War start from here. We ourselves created violence. So then, religion failed. And existing modern education also failed. Some of these real war hero are educated. So failed. Now, medicine, one scientist, you see, through science of medicine, you see, can reduce these destructive emotion. That also, this moment, like dream. Maybe one day, maybe true, become true. I don't know. So now, only hope is educate, more awareness. We are sameness, oneness of human being. If we emphasize more awareness, more serious concern, oneness, then different nation, different system, different religion is secondary. It's individual business. Our common concern is well-being of 7 billion human beings, and including also the long-lasting stable environment like that. So these are common responsibility, common interest. So this, not through resolution, like United Nations, or few nice speech, no. We have to create systematic sort of way to educate younger generation. So if may I say so, my generation, including you, these respected sort of knowledgeable sort of generation, it seems our generation creates a lot of trouble on this planet. So now, this morning I met, children, young students. I told them, now you, generation of 21st century, now you have to solve these problems which my generation created. In the name of nation, in the name of religion. So now, the proper systematic way to educate younger generation. So sometimes I sort of jokingly telling, if we start with certain sort of idea, certain vision, certain practical sort of method through education, perhaps end of this century could be, hopefully, peaceful world, compassionate world. I cannot see. My generation will not see. So then I jokingly telling, then end of this century, I may either heaven or hell. Even hell, I get some permission. 1 week visit world. So seeing world as a more compassionate world, or like today's world, a lot of hatred, a lot of fear. And then, when I return to hell, I will report to the concerned sort of leaders of the hell, or please expand the size of the hell, because a lot of people ready to come. So now only hope is education. Now education, all major religious traditions carry their main message is compassion, love, forgiveness, tolerance, self-discipline, contentment. But this, wonderful, if you seriously practice that, then wonderful. But you say out of 7 billion, over 1 billion non-believer. So we have to include these non-believer. So any sort of knowledge on the basis or belief on the basis of religious faith, then these non-believer, you see, no possibility to educate. So, and among the believer also, you see different belief, different faith. Faith itself, religion, I usually, you see, feel all religions, you see, 3 parts, 3 aspects. Right? One aspect of religion, that is love, forgiveness, so on. One part is philosophy. Philosophy, or different concept. There are a lot of differences. Concept of creator or no creator. And also concept of soul or soulless. So differences. But all these different philosophy, different concept, same purpose, to strengthening practice of love. Buddhism, no concept of creator. But Buddha emphasis, you are your own master. So Buddhism stress all the responsibility on your own shoulder. So theistic religion, you see, God, infinite love. So we are creature of that kind of, God, creator. So actually, our Father is infinite love. So we are son. You see, that really brings, the conviction. I must be compassionate person. Because of our Father, infinite love. And God loves us. So we must be, among ourselves, truly Son of God. So, ordinarily, Son of one Father, same Father. So that concept, very, very powerful. So like that, it's a different concept, different philosophy. All, it is unique sort of way of approach. You see, helping to increase the conviction of the value of compassion, like that. Then third aspect, that's culture. Some my Indian friend, you see, mentioned, before Jain master come, and of course as was Buddha, at that time, animal sacrifice, immense. So there's immense the animal sacrifice, even affect India's economy. You know, some of my Indian friends told me like that. Is it true? So such sort of such time, too much animal sacrifice. Then Mahavira, the founder of Jainism, come. He emphasizes particularly ahimsa, non-killing, non-harm, like that. And after I think 30, 40 years, Buddha come. Buddha also emphasizes non-violence. Now here, it seems to me in Arab area, and when Muhammad come, the society, I think more or less nomad, isn't it? I think at that time, nomads. So you see, no proper sort of structure or proper rule. So a lot of crimes. Because of that kind of environment, you see the Quran, some special sort of emphasis, Sharia law. So you see, that's cultural aspect. So religion's aspect, all same. Philosophical field, some differences, but same purpose. Then cultural heritage, some differences. That because of the circumstances at that time. So now, religion aspect, no need change. Philosophical viewpoint, also no need change. Cultural aspect, the society, I think most of these religions started the society more or less feudal system. So some of the sort of religious sort of institution also some similarity of feudal system. So a little bit authoritarian. Now, you see, for example, in Buddhist, Tibetan Buddhist tradition, you see too much emphasis about Lama. So whatever Lama say, you have to accept. Sometimes, actually, you see, Buddha stated different way. Buddha taught, oh, my follower, monks, scholars, should not accept my teaching out of faith. And my teaching, you should analyze or investigate and then experiment. Through that way, you see, you feel, because of that, you feel right. Then you accept my teaching. Not like some Tibetan Lama, or whatever I say, you must accept. Buddha, our supreme founder, he very liberal sort of way. I think if Buddha there, some Tibetan Lama may criticize Buddha, oh, your statement is wrong. Whatever Lamas say, you must accept. That you get the name of Guru Yoga. It's a deeper meaning, not like that. Like that. In any way, so this, I feel, some sort of impact the existing society system, feudal system, like that, or king, like that. So that part, I think from time to time, we have to change. That's my view. So in any way, now this main point is, now time come, we have to think seriously and try to experiment how to put in the existing modern education field some education about inner value as a part of science. I usually call hygiene or education about hygiene of this physical. So similarly, hygiene of our emotion is very similar. You see, poor people, poverty, their main sort of concern is their physical health and economy, well-being. You see, better sort of, richer people, even you see, big companies owner, mentally very unhappy, too much stress, too much worry, isn't it? So money failed to bring inner peace. So you see, through awareness, how to tackle our emotional difficulties. For example, stress, too much fear. You see, these, through training of mind, you see, you can change like that. So, not based on religious faith, but secular way. Now, I think you, Indian, you hear, according to Indian understanding, secular means respect all religions. And some my friends in the West, they consider secular means disrespect religion or distance from religion. But according to Indian understanding, like Mahatma Gandhi, very, very religious-minded. And Rajendra Prasad, the first Indian president, I think member of the constitution writing, and Dr. Ambedkar, very religious-minded. But they produce a constitution based on secular. So according to Indian understanding, secular, instead of disrespect, secular means respect all religion and also respect non-believer. About 3,000 years, you see, there was, you see, one school of thought we call Charvaka, non-believer. This is just this life. After this life, nothing. No spirituality, no God, no Buddha, nothing. So that's ancient nihilism or materialistic. So, you see, the rest of Indian school of thought criticize Charvaka's view, nihilism. However, people who hold that sort of thinking refer Rishi. Rishi means sage. So there's indication, respect these non-believer. So there's some, my Indian friend, including the former Deputy Prime Minister of India, Advani, told me, once we discussed about secular, he told me, secular also means respect non-believer. So that, according to Indian understanding, secular is, I think, very fit today's reality. There are over a billion number of non-believer. These also part of humanity. So we must include these people. So education should be universal, including non-believer. So education based on secular, according to Indian understanding. That's, I think, very relevant. So that's all. Now your turn, questions. And question completely free.
I think, Your Holiness, thank you very much indeed. In this In this, your birthday year, I think a few people might have some questions about your life story and might like to hear some of the stories of how you felt. What was your first experience of compassion that you remember, Your Holiness?
Although at that time, you see, no particular sort of word or kasurta, six just that, top Tigorba. Dini Amar, Mrs. Six Amar.
There's that early stage.
Or something like certain thought, follow word, first word, that, you see, develop certain sort of thought or concept, like that. So when I was very young, not yet, you see, develop these things. But I do, you see, feel my mother's smile, and you see, kasoda, hugging, and my mother's milk. So I believe that is first lesson, how much value about affection. Later, now scientists also say after birth, you see, next few weeks, mother's physical touch is key factor for proper development or enlargement of our child's brain. Now I think here, this very moment, appears everybody very smart. Deep inside, those individuals who received maximum affection from their parent, particularly from their mother, and spend longer time with mother, I think in deep inside, more happier, more peaceful, more self-confidence. Those individuals, great professor, or great smart, but in early life, it's something lacking, mother's affection, or sort of lacking affectionate atmosphere. So such people, in deep inside, some kind of sense of insecurity there. So some kind of fear in deep inside. So like that. So I usually consider my mother's immense affection is the first lesson of compassion. Then later, of course, I practice, I meditate about compassion. So without that seed, it's difficult to develop. So from that viewpoint, I born very remote place, but I feel very fortunate. You see, in my village, no proper care for a child born. And as a matter of fact, our tradition, child should not born in our own house, but cow shelter service, a cow shade, like that. So there is no certain sort of facility to play. So only thing is my mother carry me, and when mother, you see, some field work, I carry. So nothing, you see, to play like that. So then my mother is so kind to me, so that in a way, a little bit spoiled. Reason, my mother always carry me on her shoulder, so I feel very comfortable. Then I hold my mother's 2 ears. When I want to go this side, then go this. This side, go that. If mother not follow my instruction, then I shout, and then my leg, like that. So like that. So that's, I think, quite happy sort of experience. Then, yes.
I wanted to remind you, Johannes, there was you once told me a story about when you were in the Nobilinka, which was His Holiness's summer palace in Lhasa. There was a large fish pond.
Oh, yes.
And you had some experience trying to compel the fish.
Compel soy. Pia. Actually, I think as a young boy, it's a one way feeding, one way catching, and then you hold by hand. You say, look, their mouth, and sometimes put my finger in their mouth, whether there's teeth or not. So create a lot of disturbances for those fish. One way feeding, like that. So mixture, create some trouble, as well as create some sort of compassionate attitude.
You also told me, Your Holiness, about a parrot. There was a parrot, I believe, that sometimes failed to obey you, and you explained that you learned something about compassion from
yes.
this parrot.
You see, different birds in cage. One particular sort of bird, one parrot, one small parrot. So originally, one member of search party who visited my own village. So later he became official, sort of the main sort of leader of the official who was looking after my sort of daily life. So then he also, you see, carry sort of teaching how to write Tibetan. So every day he come to teach me how to write. So when he come, you see, he always carries some nut to feed that sort of the parrot. So then eventually, that parrot, you see, become very, very friendship with, you see, that official. When he approaching, I mean, he entered the yellow wall sort of gate, and his sort of the footstep sound, that parrot distinguish. When that parrot, you see, heard, you see, his step, footstep, and parrot already, you see, showing some excitement. Then feeding some nuts. Then, you see, my teacher, you see, his finger put inside the cage, and then, you see, go like petting that parrot. And then, you see, that parrot, you see, the wind like that. And something very, very unusual, friendly attitude. Sometimes, you see, my teacher, you see, show his finger under sort of the beak survey, beak, beak, no. And he do that. And then the parrot go like that. Then you see some nut, huge,
regurgitate.
Oh, like that. So you see, the parrot is nothing offer. Only what he ate, you see, the nut. So that offer. Such nice. No language, no religion, but affection really affects. Then I developed jealousy. I also wanted that kind of attitude from that small parrot. So you see, few occasions I feed nuts, quite clever. Take nut and show very negative face towards me. One time, second time, third time. Then I lost my temper. Then I took one small a stick, punishment. Then no hope, you see, reconciliation, like that. So that also is one of my experience. sort of experience. If you really constantly showing affection, even animal very much appreciate, become very close friend. Some different motivation, they try to feed, they know, or not very sincere, like that. So that kind of sort of closeness feeling or affection, not necessarily based on religion, religious faith. Religious faith very helpful to strengthening these feelings. Although itself, I think, a biological factor, and I think common experience like that. Yes?
You mentioned, Your Holiness, that you weren't the best behaved young boy in Tibet, but that when that in fact you were quite lazy and quite naughty even.
Oh.
But that in your teenage years you decided that you did want to work hard. What was it that brought about this transformation in attitude?
I think in the early age, I think below 15, 30, I'm quite a lazy student. Daily, my tutor come, one lesson morning, one lesson afternoon. So the time morning about 9 or 10, the afternoon about 3. So when you see watch, you see closer 3 o'clock, I feel something sarvesosha.
I feel very down.
Huh?
I feel very down when the time reach around 3.
So very lazy. And my mind, my sharpness of my mind or memory, quite good. So without much effort, you see, I learned quickly. Then in front of my tutor, you see, I learned quite seriously. Actually, not much serious. Sometimes cheating my tutor. Like that. So that, occasionally, I really feel regret. You see? Now, those, I think, a few years, the best period, Chinese forces not yet come. I also, you see, have not yet take the political temporal responsibility. So I'm quite free. But during that period, I remain very lazy student. So you see, I feel, few years I really lost. Now, wasted. Now, no possibility to repeat that. That sometimes I feel regret. And then around 13, I start the study of debate, logical way to debate. Then, you see, not out of compassion, but out of sense of competition. You see, some my sort of debate partner, all scholar. So you see, some of them really top scholar. So I have no courage to defeat them. So I usually carry some talks and some sort of simple way debate. And then some not that much sort of sharp-minded. Although they know, you see, they know, you see, this subject, but their mind not very sharp. My mind a little bit sharper. So, you see, I spend more time debate with these scholars. So sometimes,
occasionally I cheat with them, and because of that, sometimes I win when I debate with the less scholar monks.
So then I feel very, very happy I defeat that. So it's more enthusiasm for study, further study like that. So like that. Then of course, 1951, I got the responsibility of temple thing. Then Tibet already, the Liberation Army already reached Tibet. Then it became difficult. Then 1954, I went to China, to Peking, and a few months remained there. Then I learned socialism and also Marxism. So I very much attracted about Marxism, about the international working class movement. So sometimes you see my sort of these days, my sort of talking sense of universal responsibility. That also some connection with my lesson about borderless, some kind of international movement. Now, I very much attracted. And then Marxist economy, equal distribution. Equal distribution. Oh, wonderful. So, still today, as far as socio-economic theory is concerned, I'm Marxist. What do you think? Jyoti Basu, the West Bengal chief minister, is a communist, Marxist, but his private life is very much a bourgeois life. So, not very sincere. I am Buddhist monk, so lifestyle, simple. So perhaps I'm more sincere follower of Marxism, as far as economies, or social economy the theory is concerned. But I totally against Leninism. Lenin, ruthless, totalitarian. And because of ruthless and totalitarian, whole their system very much based on suspicion, distrust. So that secrecy become part of communist sort of regime. It's really sort of sad, really sad. That Marxism, I think, pure original concept. Leninism, during Civil War, Bolshevik, you see, took the power. So during wartime, secrecy, distrust, ruthless is relevant. So during wars, I say the certain practice become part of communist system. That's really unfortunate. Like that. So then 56, I came to India. Then 57, 58, these 2 years, I did serious study, particularly Buddhist logic. As a result of study Buddhist logic, that is my attitude to become, whenever I heard or I saw something, the immediate question is, why? So it looks something like skepticism. It's very helpful. More skepticism, more doubt brings question. Question brings investigation. Investigation brings the clearer picture of the reality. So very, very important. Like that. Some question from the audience?
Oh, Your Highness, I was just going to, if I may, ask you about when you were in China and you met with Chairman Mao. You
Yes.
said at the time you met a lot of the leadership, the
Yes.
Chinese leadership, you really respected.
Yes. At
What
that time, the entire leaders, I think central government leader or party leader I met. Oh, I'm very much impressed. These really dedicated, serving for people, particularly working class people, wonderful, wonderful. But then, around 1957, the 100th flower, that movement. Then, you see, those intellectuals, you see, become also weed survey. Weed, worthwhile to remove. Then gradually, Cultural Revolution. Then they really, I think, very, very destructive period, like that.
And what are your memories, Your Holiness, of Chairman Mao himself? Would you tell us?
Mao Zedong himself, very nice. I really admire as one patient and a determined person with Marxist sort of ideology. So then he really carried the public sort of mass movement. And a lot of difficulties he faced, but in spite of these difficulties, his determination, his sort of aim is never sort of shaken. That's very good. And then when I met him, oh, very nice. I really feel great revolutionary. And I met several times. So my relation with Chairman Mao Zedong almost become like relation between father and son. So many occasions, you see, some sort of festival, some sort of luncheon party or dinner party. When Mao Zedong there, he always brought me beside him. So as Chinese tradition, you see, from his own sort of plate, you see, some food is share with your friend. So Chairman Mao do that. So one way I feel quite proud. You see, Chairman Mao himself now sharing from his own plate with his chopstick, you see, like that. One way, a little bit fear. Chairman Mao Zedong chain smoking, chain smoking. Oh, quite often, like that. So from his plate and his sort of chopstick, I may got some sort of germs. A little worry. Like that. Oh, very nice, very nice. And then the commander-in-chief of Korean War, Tan Duc-Hui. Oh, very straightforward. Not much talk. A few words, but very, very sincere, very straightforward, very dedicated. And Liu Shaoqi, my own boss, also is very nice. Zhou Enlai, his eyes, short moment, he always look like that. So I have not much full respect or full trust. He's too much clever. Like that. So then I really feel, I think pure Marxism, I think much spoiled by Lenin. And then of course Stalin, not much educated. And wartime, I think a little bit stubborn person. So like that. Perhaps Ho Chi Minh may be better. Venom, Ho Chi Minh. More nationalistic, like that. And Chairman Mao, originally good. But then later, he is spoiled by his power, like that. So when I was there, he often say, criticism of Communist Party, really necessary, criticism from self-criticism, because of the self-criticism, and also receive criticism from others. It's very necessary. Without criticism, or like fish without water. So very necessary. But then after 57, that completely changed. Like that. Any criticism to party and become criminal, like that. So then, the original beautiful concept or idea spoiled by themselves, mainly due to their power and also ignorance, right? And a totalitarian system. I often, you see, expressing China, 1.3, now I think 3 points, the 3 point of Kasa.
1.3.
Oh,
1.3 billion.
yes, 1.3 billions have every right to know the reality. Once 1.3 billion Chinese people knows the reality, they also have the ability to judge what is right, what is wrong. So therefore, censorship is immoral. Your censorship you cannot carry outside the world, only within the country. So it's actually fooling their own people. So must be sort of free sort of information. It's very important. Nowadays, through technology, you cannot control fully. And also large number of students who study abroad. So therefore, the reality cannot hide completely. So then, there's too much censorship is simply losing trust from the public to the party, like that. And then another important thing is, nowadays, you see, the Chinese president very much emphasizes the rule of law. So this is wonderful. So the Chinese judiciary system should promote the international standard of judicial system. That's very important. Otherwise, I met a number of Chinese patients, very poor. Recently, I also met one Chinese factory worker. Their face also, see, very poor. And then I inquire, it's in their sort of, I say, conditions. Very difficult, very poor. And particularly the farmers, when I ask them, you see, in their own village, the religious, the village's leaders, parties or chief, these people, their only concern is money. So their position, their power, used for money, making money. No pay attention about the poor peasants in their own area. So those who peasant, poor peasants told me, now in their village, nobody take care of them. So very difficult situation. The condition very, very poor. So the judiciary, independent judiciary system. India, although you see some drawbacks here and there, corruption is also there, but basically still rule of law, independent judiciary system. Wonderful, isn't it? Like that. Then?
So, Your Highness, you came into exile in 1959. This, of course, must have been a very painful experience, but even from the first day, it seems you showed a tremendous optimism, an extraordinary optimism. What is the basis of this optimism?
Truth, honest. Our aim, something truthful. So we carry this effort with honest, transparent. So nothing hide. So I always describing the struggle between power of truth and the power of gun. Short-term, power of gun is much stronger. Long-term, power of truth is much, much stronger. So we, right from the beginning, we carry our work, mainly preservation of Tibetan culture, Tibetan rich Buddhist knowledge. I think now today, on this planet, I think our knowledge about Nalanda tradition, about Buddhism, I think our knowledge is like a complete form compared to other Buddhist countries. Burma, Thailand, Sri Lanka, Cambodia, Laos, these mainly follow of Theravada tradition. Then China, Vietnam, Korea, Japan, Mongolia, these following Nalanda tradition, as well as Tibet. So now, best sort of form, and best form or best sort of knowledge through rigorous study, I think available only Tibetan tradition. And then the language also, the best language to describe the Nalanda tradition, Nalanda thought. I think Tibetan language is the best language to describe precisely. Although Buddhism reached China before reached Tibet, I think Tibet only 7th century and mainly 8th century. Buddhism reached China proper, I think 2nd century, 3rd century, like that, much earlier. But then knowledge, you see, our knowledge is much better because we carry at least 20, 30 years rigorous study, root text learned by heart. Then each sort of word, each kasa, that means sentence,
Verses.
verse, means so. Each word. You should then explain word by word. And then through debate, you should try to understand the correct meaning precisely, like that. So one my friend, one Japanese, you see, since many years we know each other. So one day he told me, we Japanese Buddhists, we always recite a certain sort of text, but without knowing the meaning. So my explanation about these texts is very, very helpful. He told me like that. So we study word by word, rigorously. So many of these sort of countries recite these things, but without much study, so do not know what the real meaning of that. Yes?
And then in the 1960s, Your Holiness, you said those were very dark years for Tibet. This, of course, the 1960s, the first few years after you came into exile. Of course, in China, the Cultural Revolution came. But even before the Cultural Revolution, there was great destruction in Tibet.
Yes.
Destruction of shrines, destruction of monasteries, destruction of religious texts. And then even today, we see in Syria, we see a similar kind of destruction going on. How do you account for this? It seems like a moment of collective madness where whole populations start to destroy. What is the explanation? What is your explanation of this?
I think it's difficult to precisely. I think different area, maybe some different sort of causes. But overall, I think short-sighted and ignorance. That's I feel. And then totalitarian sort of regimes, like now today, I think like former Soviet Union, immediately after collapse of Soviet Union, I already have some sort of friend among the Soviet sort of officials, and mainly the friends of Gorbachev. So we know quite well each other. So immediately after collapse of Soviet Union, one occasion we met, and then one of my friends told me, nowadays in Russia, in school, about history book, not there, because during the Soviet Union, certain history book is too much distortion. new book based on fact not yet developed. So therefore, no history book. That is the case of China. During Cultural Revolution, the media full praising Cultural Revolution. Great achievement. Great revolutionary sort of movement. And immediately after the Cultural Revolution, then it's the same sort of source, the media say, oh, during Cultural Revolution, you see some achievement there, but also some damage also done. And after some time, then the same sort of source say, during Cultural Revolution, everything is destruction, destructive. So, according policy, you see this information, you see accordingly is mentioned, like that. So therefore, you see ignorance, I think key factor, do not know the reality, like that. So like Tibet, I think actually Tibetan, you see, they appreciate there's so much sort of constructions and also education. But education, one-sided education. And then construction, just external thing. So the Tibetan loves their own culture, like Han brothers, sisters loves their own culture, their own language. Similarly, we Tibetan also loves our own culture, our own language. So some, you see, the policy restriction about Tibetan culture, about Tibetan study, Tibetan language, then, you see, it really hurts Tibetan mind, like that. So these, you see, these officials do not know that. And suppose, you see, the report from the local officials, also, you see, very much distorted. Therefore, during Huyanfang, when he visited different places, firstly, he sent some of his trusted sort of friends, go this area and analyze the situation. Then received full information. Then official visit come. So before his official come, he already get the real sort of information like that. So he similarly, before he came to Tibet, I think 1980, before he came to Tibet, he sent some trusted his friend. Then all information he received before he came to Lhasa. So when he reached Lhasa, the local officials, you see some nice sort of report, you see start reporting. Then immediately Kuyama say, oh, no need, I already have all this information. So then he starts some scolding. The central government spent a lot of money. Where is this money? Whether you see you thrown this money to Kasa,
In the river.
to Kasa, Brahmaputra, like that. So you see these distorted information. So from lower sort of level officials, you see report, distorted report. They believe this kind of report, you see, suitable in their ear, and then accordingly, you see, they wrote a report. Then that report was superior. Then finally, the top leaders are full of ignorance. That's sort of the totalitarian system, and too much sort of censorship. So sort of was the negative result. So the free information, and Western Europe or Europe now, the whole Europe, wonderful. And America, wonderful. Completely free information. That's very important. Right?
Some people might argue that this destructive behavior on the part of human beings nonetheless shows that human nature itself is finally destructive and not compassionate.
No. There's no. There's some scientists, some scientists, you see, carry some research. So the other day, I think I mentioned, this morning I mentioned differently. So you know, the infant child, few months old child, is a not yet developed language.
Ouch.
I give him, since he's a long-time friend, so I give him some nickname, Big Nose. So another American, later he became abbot of one important monastic sort of college. So he also, you see, his nose, some special nose, quite thin and very, very long. So I always, whenever I met him, my greetings is first is to touch his nose.
See what I have to put up with.
So touch, you see, nose, a big nose. Then the nose even become bigger like that. So, that's how the question goes on. Oh, so you see, I also saw, you see, that sort of their report. 2-3 months old baby, not yet developed language. And to that baby, you see, show cartoon. One cartoon, you see, young boy or young children play together. When that infant child, seeing that, smiling. Then another cartoon, 2 children, see, a little bit sort of a negative attitude each other. Showing that cartoon, that infant child feel unhappy. So therefore, basic human nature is more compassionate. When compassionate attitude, see, feel happy. Destructive emotion, harming emotion come, unhappy. So therefore, then most important, more compassionate mind, physical condition, much better. Constant anger, hatred, fear, actually eating our immune system. That's scientific finding. So it's a more compassionate mind, very helpful to sustain our immune system, like that. So these are scientific findings. And then also is our common sense use. Those your neighbor whose family economically may not be very rich, but full of compassion, full of affection in that family, then each one very happy, full of smile. And then one family, a very rich family, was the house and several cars and the furniture, very good, and food, everything, dress, and including diamond rings, like that. You see, very rich, but in that home, lack of affection, little bit jealousy, distrust. And then, in that family, even one visitor visit there, when you reach that room, something cold. Those family, economically poor, but full of affection. When you reach there, something warm. Like that. So therefore, it's a basic human nature, according the scientific sort of test or research, and also they are finding about immune system, and also use common sense, which family more happier. So then also our common experience. We all come from our mother. Recently, on BBC report, I heard mother's milk, feeding mother's milk to the child is very essential, because, you see, after birth, the child, according to their physical sort of growing, the certain sort of certain materials in the milk also, you see, change, mother's milk. So that very fit the necessity of the child, different month, growing month, their physical also growing. So accordingly need certain sort of chemical. That automatically develop in mother's milk. At cow milk, this is not there. So therefore, feeding mother's milk is very, very important. So these are quite strange, quite mysterious. If you accept Creator, and really Creator, really wonderful, create that kind of situation like that. So therefore, see, this is our common experience. We all come from our mother. We all received maximum affection. So that experience really absorbed in our blood. So we all, 7 billion human beings, all have the seed of affection. So now through education, you see, nurtured, you see, that sort of seed, then there is a real possibility to develop. So in a way, 1,000 years, including Buddhism, we always pray to Buddha, to God, to Allah. I think, frankly speaking, fail to bring happy humanity. Now through education, through our own effort, you see, we can achieve happy humanity. So then, I think we always say grateful to God. Now one day, God say grateful to His creature. You really make because of the happy world. Like that.
This raises an interesting point, Your Holiness. Although you've said that secular ethics and the practice of compassion does not require religious belief, you yourself practice every day several hours in meditation and training the mind. Do you think that religious belief is, in fact, helpful as a way of helping to be compassionate?
Oh, yes, no doubt. But then, I noticed, many of my Christian friends, oh, really? Their whole life dedicated serving to other people, particularly poor people, like late Mother Teresa, and some other, a Christian practitioner, and also some Muslim. Wonderful. As well as Jews and some Hindus. So all religions really have immense sort of potential to strengthening our, basic human value, compassion. But then the question is, that cannot be universal. So this problem is universal. So the method to solve this problem also should be universally acceptable, fit universally, like that. And then, particularly, non-believers, large number of non-believers there. We cannot impose, you should believe religion. You should believe this religion, that religion. And that's difficult.
You're now 80 years old, Your Holiness, and yet your schedule of travel would be considered demanding for somebody half your age. You arrived off the aeroplane at 3 o'clock yesterday evening. This morning you were attending a press conference. You've been on the go all day today.
Oh,
You have a full,
now yawning.
a full program in Cambridge tomorrow and the next day,
There's no
and
problem.
then London.
No
How,
problem.
looking around this room though, Johannes, I see that, people are beginning to, the grey hair is beginning to emerge. What advice do you have for people who are embarking on their... What advice do you have for people who are...
I don't know. I think firstly, we should be realistic. So, I'll become old, and you should accept, now I'm old person. So, you see, physically become old, but mentally, you see, you want to be like a young person, right? Yeah. So, these are unrealistic. And some old people, you see, they pretended, you see, they're still young. I saw, I think a few years ago, one election in the United States, one candidate, although you see, quite old, but he trying to show is very fit. So sometimes you see, mentally, you still, you see, want to be more young and can want to show acting like young person. Then reality cannot. So then you start pretended. Once you see you practice because of pretension, right? Pretension, then that gives you more stress, more anxiety. So accept the reality. Last year, I met one German specialist, my niece, and he thoroughly checked. Then he told me, oh, your physical condition is very good. But then your niece, then he mentioned, you are not 18 years old, but 80-year-old person. So you see, this naturally now becoming more difficult and worse because of your age. I felt that a great teaching. Reminds me, I'm an old person. I must accept, you see, that reality. So, you see, and then like death. You see, we accept it. Death is part of our life. Sooner or later will death come. Sometimes you see people, even, you see, they try to avoid, even use word of death. It's silly. When you see totally unprepared to death, then actual death comes. Much of difficulties. You accept, sooner or later death will come. It's part of our life. Where there is birth, there is death. Automatically come. When sun rise, sunset, automatically come. Like that. So our life go like that. If once you accept the reality, then actual death come. Well, yes. Now end of life come. It's part of our life. Much easier. What do you think? Same age now, 80-year-old.
I became a philosopher because at the age of 6, my sister told me I'd die. I said, don't be ridiculous, that's only for butterflies. And when my mother told me the truth, I became a philosopher. You see, I'm very defective. I'm very defective, and I prefer to have your view. I'm trying.
Oh. So that I feel is sometimes it's an old person pretended as a young person. Some and worst thing is some foolish person is they try to show very, very intelligent. Then very difficult. Then talk few sentences, then really shows that foolishness. but he or she still pretends something very sort of smart.
Well, the reality is, Your Holiness, that it's 3:45 now, and our time with you is drawing to a close. On behalf of everybody present, I'd like to thank Your Holiness for joining us here.
Thank you.
Today.
Thank you. Okay. I really appreciate, you see, your effort, and also, you see, you come to see me or to listen. So I very much appreciate. The change, try to the change, better world, happier world. Ultimately, it's entirely up to us. We have to make effort. So particularly like famous education institution, Oxford, like this, like here. I think some kind of controller of nerve system. So you see certain new ideas, you see certain new thinkings, I think must develop, must start from such sort of famous institution. So I had opportunity to talk, to share. So about concern for well-being of humanity, each of us have the responsibility. I always consider myself as one of the human beings. So as my own share, I try my best make some contribution for well-being of humanity. So you also, each of you, also part of the humanity. So if you come here to see me from another planet, then different thing. If you all, you see, born in this planet, now have to live on this planet and have to die in this planet, I think we all have this common responsibility. Try to make a little contribution for a better world, happier world. Happier world start from individual, not from organization like United Nations or government level. We individual should try to make more compassionate person, then create compassionate family. And then about, say, 100 family, there's community. 1,000 family, 10,000 family. Through that way, happy, sort of, say, the compassionate United Kingdom. Then rest of the whole Europe. Then must extend towards, you see, Africa, like that. So we Asia, from India, you see, have to sort of try to express or try to educate, you see, the concept of secular ethics, ahimsa, mahakaruna, and religious harmony to other countries. That way, in the Asian continent, within the Asian, make some effort to change. And the European continent, within Europe, European people should start some new thinking and make effort. And Africa, similarly. I often say, telling when I met some African people, some kind of, although the idea, Pan-African, there, now should start, should make effort, like European Union, African Union, should start. Then I think many trouble within the African different states, I think will reduce. And then a lot of money save, and then spend. Those poor people. Now, at present, because of the Ethiopia, number of people are facing starvation. So very sad, very sad. When we think of these things, oh, this happened in our own planet, just our neighbor. We cannot remain indifferently. Just as a crying or feeling of sadness won't solve the problem. Make effort with vision, step by step, systematic. So it is possibility our next generation may enjoy happier world. So let us try, make contribution. Start from individual. Sometimes this is something, good things through prayer come from sky or something. That's unrealistic. We must start and change humanity through individual, change through individual. That's the proper way. So old people, now including myself, now almost now time come, say goodbye. So tell our younger generation, we experienced, we witnessed too much violence. All this we created. You see, ultimately on the basis of too much sense of we and they. And that also ultimately sense of I, me, that. Too much self-centered attitude is the ultimate source of these divisions and violence and exploitation and bully, all these things. So altruism, respect all other, same human being, same right. So sense of oneness of humanity, I think very, very important. We can do that, isn't it? Thank you. Good night.